Anybody that knows me really well knows that I have been frugal for most of my life. And well, you know what? Let me not say that because that's a lie. I have been cheap for most of my life. Now, you're asking, okay, what's the difference between being cheap and being frugal? Here it is. The definition of cheap is stingy. Stingy means that you are reluctant to give or spend and that you are not generous. Cheap also means miserly, which means that you are willing to live in wretched circumstances just to save or hoard money. Now, to say that I was cheap is kind of rough. Like, that's a rough thing to say about yourself, but that was the reality. I was so cheap that when I had my first apartment, I had a good paying job. It was salaried and I had benefits. My electric bill was somewhere between $15 to $25 a month. Why was I still getting shut off notices? I don't know. I hated to put money out for anything. I was living in an apartment building where it was dry chicken bones in the hallway. There was a resident creepy dude who would stand at the doorways of the buildings and watch people with their comings and goings so that he could eventually rob our apartments of our belongings. I could have done better. I had the money to do better. Why was I living this way? The fact of the matter is that cheap people are not strategic with their money at all. They're just tight-fisted with it. They don't want to let it go. So I like to say you might be cheap if you go to buy a lower price item, and even though you know you're going to have to buy 5 times more of the same item over the next year, you're going to opt for this low quality item just so you don't have to pay more right now. That's cheap. And that was me. Now, I don't know if I was like this from birth. I don't know, but I do know that I can kind of trace it back to when I was in my early teens and our family was going through, we had like some financial struggle. It didn't last forever, but it was long enough to have been cemented into our family history. And it was 6 of us in the house. I was the oldest child and I had 3 brothers. So the oldest brother was just growing like crazy. His shoe size and his age were always like the same number. So he always needed sneakers. And then the middle brother, he would his sleeves would be all chewed up like he was eating his clothes for dessert. I don't know what was going on, but everybody always needed something. And I was straight for the most part because my aunts would give me their clothes and they were good quality clothes. So I was good. But at this point was when I learned to make do with what I already had instead of spending more money. So this is also the time where my creativity kind of got a boost because I started looking around and like, well, let me see how I can make things that I need or make stuff that I want. And by the time I was 13, my whole motto was, why pay for it when you can do it yourself? Now, fast forward back to when I'm in my apartment, and like I said, I would not pay for a $25 electric bill. So guess what else I didn't pay? My rent. So of course I got evicted. Next thing you know, I'm back at my parents' house. I had no job. I just felt completely done. And I remember just the Spirit of God saying to me, you don't have to be depressed and you don't have to complain. Do something. And so I closed my eyes and I got a vision and a picture in my head of what I wanted my life to look like. This is the point where I started to transition from being cheap to being frugal. Now, frugal means that you avoid waste and extravagance, and that you prudently save, and that you're not wasteful with your money or your resources. Now, I said you might be frugal if you compare 2 items by quality and price, and when you realize that that lower quality, lower priced item is going to require you to buy multiple of that item within a short period of time, that you opt to buy the higher priced item because you know it's going to last. That would be a frugal person. My rule of thumb for telling the difference between being cheap and being frugal is this. Cheap people focus on minimizing their costs in the moment, whereas frugal people think about minimizing their costs over time. So at this point, I'm leaning all the way in, and I got about 2 temporary jobs. I started to pay down the debts that I had. I had credit card debt from college, paid it off, went back to that apartment, paid off the rent that I owed. I got my student loans out of default, started paying my tithes, and y'all know cheap people, that is hard to do, but I was doing it. And within about 5 months, I had the job that I wanted. Like, it was the dream job for me at that time. And I started budgeting my money out. I started saving my money. I got my credit score up. I was making a financial plan. And within 1.5 to 2 years, I was walking into my own house. So if you didn't know before the difference between being cheap and being frugal, now you know. So are you cheap or are you frugal? Do you want to know what your spending says about you? Then head on over to my website at frugalcreativeliving.com and take this fun quiz.